So, James White goes to the text, but then reads a number of verses to put it in the, quote, proper context. Quote, this passage is not speaking about salvation as a topic. Yet the context indicates that the audience is quite specific. Peter writes to a specific group, not to all of mankind, to those who have received a faith of the same kind as ours. In essence, Peter is saying the coming of the Lord has been delayed so all the elect of God can be generated in. We'll check into that. He goes on to say, repentance instead is clearly his plan, and he will that all the elect come to repentance, and they most assuredly will do so. What is his point? Well, I think faithlife.com does the best job in summing up the particular Calvinist position, though this is not the majority position. Quote, the Lord is not slow to fulfill his promise as unbelievers count slowness, but is patient toward his elect, not wishing that any of his chosen ones should perish, but that all the elect should reach repentance. So, here are my thoughts. The Apostle Peter wrote to Christians. Yeah, that's a given, just as the Apostle Paul wrote to saints in many congregations. Yet what we see in the Bible is some spots is a status about mankind, like the beginning chapters of the book of Romans and even 2 Peter. That speaks of the fate of unbelievers. The text indeed speaks of the second coming. That is why it relates. The Apostle Peter is declaring that the Lord is faithful, but then gives one of the reasons why the second coming has not happened yet. So this verse is very important since it addresses in detail the second coming. James White says the reference to coming to repentance in 3:9 is made in passing. Yet, this quote, made in passing, answers the why the second coming has not happened yet. Who is the any and all in this verse? Now, to James White, it has to be the elect, that God does not want to perish, but that they would all be born and regenerated and then completely saved, and then Jesus returns. The reason why Jay believes it this way is because he sees through the lens of Calvinism. That is why when he says he studies it the same way as he does the doctrine of Trinity, I know he's mistaken. By the way, he admits this by this quote, this is surely the most popular passage cited, almost never without any reference to context. Don't worry, I'm going to give some to you, okay? Okay, Mr. James? To prove that God could not possibly desire to save a specific people, but instead desires to save every single individual person, thereby denying election and predestination. End quote. Yes, the word election and predestination are in the Bible, but doesn't mean that James White's interpretation is the proper one. Quote, Peter is explaining the reason why the coming of Christ has been delayed as long as it has. End quote. That is why JW believes, but what does the Bible teach? Checking out the verse, 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 9, the Lord does not delay and is not tardy or slow about what he promises, according to some people's conception of slowness. Notice what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 24 verse 22. Except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. For the elect's sake, those days shall be what? Shortened. That is why preaching the gospel is so important. Matthew 24:14, and the gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then will the end come. So that to me is showing why the gospel has to be preached everywhere. So, 2 Peter 3:9, the Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some men count slackness. To me, our view of the second coming is not the same as God, since he sees it outside of time, but we can't. But notice, is long-suffering to us word. God is patient. To me, this is the key to the next part of the verse. Why does he have to be patient toward us? Now, there is a Calvinist mindset, but I want to offer a more balanced premise. Because the saints to which the Apostle Peter were writing to were under heavy persecution. In their mind, why hasn't the Lord come back yet? They are crying out to him, and God is having patience in hearing them again and again. So much that the Apostle Peter actually dealt with this in writing in this letter. Not something necessarily in passion, but answering the cries of the people he was writing to. In God's defense, God is basically saying, hang in there. I have a reason why I did not come back yet. My heart is not desiring that any should perish, but that all should turn to repentance. Listen closely. The ones that the Apostle Peter is writing to have already repented. Thus, the Apostle Peter is saying that God does not desire that any should perish, just as he said in the Timothy passage, God desires all to be saved. And the Gospel of John passage states that God not only loved the world, but the next verse states that God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but through him the world might be saved. In conclusion, Jesus desires to bring us under his care. Come unto me, all ye that are heavy laden. But we must not allow man in hindering us to have a heart for God. For God desires all of us to be saved. And we, as saints, must remember that God is being patient with the 99, not willing that any should perish, as he goes out to find the lost sheep, that when he is found, there will be great joy in heaven.